Hello. Today we have Karen Hudes, uh, who studied law at Yale University and economics at the University of Amsterdam. She was a chief counsel, if I'm correct, at the World Bank. Correct?
Actually,
Correct
I
me.
never made it to chief counsel. I was senior counsel. They
Senior
they saw
counsel.
me coming and kept me in the basement for a long time.
Anyway, she has a lot of insights into what's going on in international finance and has some warnings for us to listen to. I'm going to turn it over to her and have her explain to us what she sees as the issues at this level and what we can do about it.
Thanks for having me to your conference, and I want to say how happy I am that Bitcoin exists because it is going to rescue humanity from a huge transition problem that we're facing. The currency, as we know it, is founded on a Ponzi scheme that makes Bernie Madoff look like Santa Claus. Seriously. And I found this out because I was just doing my job as a run-of-the-mill lawyer in the World Bank legal department, which is where I worked for 20 years. But the thing that's special about me is that when things turned south, and I knew they turned south because I had worked as a securities lawyer before I went to the World Bank, and you need to have information going to the bondholders that's accurate, and if something is being hidden, if there's a cover-up, then that means that money can go every which way. And I'm sure if you've been setting up a payment system, you know that if things don't add up, you need to find out why, because you don't know how much money is going missing at the end of the day. And the World Bank was absolutely not working the way a payment system needs to work, and it was at the very heart of the international financial system. And so there's a chronology, if you're interested, that you can see how I found that things were not adding up and what I did about it. And the thing about me is that I wasn't going to stop until I got to the end of the explanation. And here's the curious thing about it. I still am not convinced that I've gotten to the end of the explanation. But in the meantime, when there's a cover-up, the worst thing about a cover-up is it continues and it mounts and it grows like a snowball. And so I can tell you where that snowball is right now. And that snowball has led to the conclusion that the United States is suffering from something called state capture, that all of the transactions on the securities markets are absolutely, what can I say, the Securities and Exchange Commission is a total captive. And I have made statements on the UK Parliament together with a Scottish whistleblower, and the last statement that we made indicted the UK Parliament because the question that they were asking was, how does the complaint system work? And what I said was, the complaint system clearly does not work. This is my third statement, and you all have not done your job. And so then we had a meeting of the 188 ministers of finance that reinstated me to the World Bank. You know, I was telling you what I actually was. My title at the World Bank was senior counsel. But at a certain point, I was interviewed for the job of general counsel. And the question that I was asked was, why is there such a high turnover in general counsels? And I said, that's easy to answer. That's because the board is firing every single general counsel because there is a problem and nobody has gotten to resolve it. And you cannot have a company with $180 billion worth of bonds out of compliance. And so I have also been saying this to the state governors because they have to protect the citizens in their states. I've said this to the state attorneys general. I've said this to the sheriffs. I've said this to the county executives. And as I've been mounting this, what can I say, indictment of the entire financial system, some of the people that have joined my bandwagon, one of them is Antal Fekete, who is known as a monetary economist, and he has helped point out the fact that the U.S. dollar, actually it's not a dollar, it's the Federal Reserve note, is heading to a crash, that in July, on the 7th of July, there's something called GOFO, which is the charge for leasing gold, which is what the central banks do. That went negative.
The charge for what?
Leasing gold. What central banks do is they lease their gold out, but the risk of getting the gold back at the end of the lease term is unacceptably high. So nobody is leasing out their gold anymore. This happened in 1970 when the U.S. went off the gold standard. And we are now, if we don't correct the problem, we are going to be in a situation called permanent gold backwardation, which is when people are going to be hoarding gold, and they are not going to, the currency loses its value. So you can see right now why you want bitcoins, because we are not going to be left in the lurch. We have an insurance policy. One of the questions that you have to make sure for yourself is, if the fiat currencies go down, if you will be able to accept payment in precious metals. If you aren't in that position, you need to engineer yourself so that you are. Because if the Bitcoin system can continue to function, that means that the world's people can continue to transact business while people sort out this this temporary adjustment. That's the message that I have for you. You have to get yourself so that you're going to stay up and running, and also you have to get yourself so that if this happens to fiat currencies, you can scale up very, very rapidly, because that's actually the situation. It may happen. I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but we're also getting information that the banking system may go down. We're also getting information that the power grid may go down. So you have got to get yourself into a situation where you've got generators and other backup situations, so that you will have currency that's going forward in the middle of all kinds of possible adverse conditions.
Do you really think that it could get so bad that the power grid would go down?
I'll tell you what I believe, and this is based on information that I'm getting from other whistleblowers. There's a fictional story that we're being told, which is the possibility of a solar flare. But we also know what happened just before September 11th, 2001, when all of the computers in the banks and the security systems and the backup systems and the Twin Towers went out of whack. And then all of a sudden, trillions of dollars got erased from the books of the banks. They're going to be engineering all kinds of, because the central banks and the fiat currencies are bankrupt, and they are going out of existence, and we are going to transition to a different kind of a currency. But the question is in the transition, and we need to have fallback positions. We need to, if we're in a situation where we've got belts and suspenders and we've got the possibility of bitcoins, then we are not going to be held hostage by these crooks. And let me just tell your audience, if I don't want to waste a lot of time on what I've disclosed, but there's a very good article by a journalist named Lars Schall, and there in it you will see all of the sources. And one of the sources is a description of the super entity, which was discovered by 3 mathematicians from the Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, Switzerland, which pointed out that the banks are all actually one conglomerate, and there's a central, what they call super entity. That's how the LIBOR rate was rigged, because they have the same directors that migrate from one bank to another, and the economic power is 10 times that you would expect normally if they hadn't done a power grab. So we're talking about a power grab, and these people have, I have talked about state capture in the United States, but let me not drone on and on with the parade of horribles. Let me tell you about what's working, and that is that when the United States was set up, the framers of the Constitution had been dealing with these culprits. And I'm not going to describe who all the culprits are. If you read the history of the United States, you can find out who these culprits are. They're very much active, they're very much alive, but we have pinned them down, we have identified them, and I have been using a very accurate game theory model to build coalitions of the 188 ministers of finance in the world. And we have these crooks surrounded, and they are going to be obeying the law, and there will be a smooth transition. It's just that they're trying everything they know how to prevent themselves from being sunset in disgrace, which is where they are and where they should be. And so, yeah. You have a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One is, why do you think that the LIBOR scandal and the credit default swap scandals, which I believe involve essentially the manipulation of $800 trillion in total, why has that not made any news at all? I'll be honest, I talked to lots of people. Very, very few people have even heard of these scandals.
That is the question of the century, and the answer is that those crooks bought up the mainstream media, the same interlocking directors. You can look at how, in the last 50 years, the owners of the media has shrunk from 50 to 5, and those 5 are all interconnected. And so it has been very, very difficult. But what has happened is other whistleblowers showed me who was there in the alternative media, and I managed to get through on a scale. And don't forget, I was on Russia Today TV, and yes, and I've been on other. So at this point, we have broken through that that terrible. What can I say? The corruption is ended. It's ended, and people now, a fair number of people know who I am, and it's not just me. It's this coalition of whistleblowers, and we're just growing by leaps and bounds and getting more and more information. That's all.
I have another question for you. We have this stalemate where we're looking at you know, perhaps a default on our obligations and that sort of thing. How possible do you think it is that that this is either a distraction or perhaps the construction of an alibi to be used later?
I honestly don't know the answer to that, but it's kind of irrelevant, really. I'm not worried about the noise as the old system goes out and as the dragon flails around. The main thing is to preserve our credibility so that we can, so that we're there, we're a fact of life, and it's if you will, it is the infrastructure and the gridlock, not the gridlock, the skeleton on which you can base the new system going forward. And what I see as the future of currencies is you've got this thing called legal tender. And I see Bitcoin as a way of reducing that monopoly so that you're not held hostage. And I'm also saying to all of the state legislatures that they should also declare precious metals as legal tender, which they have the right to do. They should organize state banks. I see a proliferation of currencies so that the users of the currencies have absolute choice and flexibility. And this prevents people like those culprits from ever holding humanity hostage again. This is how the internet has attacked the mainstream media and prevented them from their own virtual reality, which is not the absolute reality. Yeah, that's how I answer that.
Okay. Do you have any 2-sentence summary of the point that you would like people to walk away from if they forget everything else you've said?
Yes, that the rule of law does actually rule, and that if people are worried about the United States, They needn't be, because one of the whistleblowers that came to me was a man who has devoted his entire life to educating people about the fifth article of the U.S. Constitution, which says that the state legislatures are entitled to call a constitutional convention. It turns out that more than 2/3 of them already did this years and years ago, and it says that the U.S. Congress shall call a constitutional convention at that point. So what happened is the Congress thought they had a choice. No, they don't have a choice. So the same Congress that has been corrupted by the Federal Reserve System, the people can, they can say, all right, if Congress isn't going to call a constitutional convention when they're required to, we're just going to let Congress go its own way. We're going to have the Constitutional Convention because the conditions have been met. And why is it that people don't know about this? It's part of the same syndrome. So there is a lot of information. At this point, I would say that I may have, together with the other whistleblowers, have uncovered maybe 30%. But there is a lot of information that I now know, and I'm going to be working together with others to bring it forward so that we're going to go forward in a situation where we're not going to be held hostage by our currency anymore. And Bitcoins is absolutely the backbone of that, for which I have to thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much.